Hey everybody, happy Saturday. I'm Jess. You probably know that because you're here. And today we are going to be talking about DM tips. I wanted to talk a little bit about prep. One thing that I see frightens people all of the time. Oh, I should turn off Nightbot because we're not doing. See, there's always something that I forget. And I'm not even going to edit this out for YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hey, guess what? You get all of my mistakes. But hey, you can join the Threeps Patreon. It's a great place to support. We love the Threeps. Anyway, uh, so one thing that this is just me off the cuff. I did put thought into this, so I'm not just spouting nonsense at you. But one of the biggest things that I see that frightens away new DMs is the prep. And if you look up like guides on how to DM, they always talk about like, oh, well, you have to prep this. You have to know all of, if it's for Dungeons and Dragons, like you have to know all of the spells. You have to know all of the monsters. You have to know this, that. Settle down, Nightbot. um, you have to know all of these things, and you have to plan for every possible way that the adventure can go. And that's terrifying. And I want to show you some notes from one of the first games that I ever ran, from when I actually tried to do that. This is from Mouse Guard. I was going to take a picture and do like a nice neat thing on the screen, but I'm not. I'm just going to hold it up. This is a flowchart that I tried to make for all possible outcomes of anything a player could do, any complications that they could make, and how it would go. And this is just the very beginning of things. Do not be like me. You cannot run a game like that. I did that at the very beginning for the first couple games before I realized you cannot possibly account for anything that the players will do. You cannot make a flowchart for like, will they take this bait or will they take that bait? Can I put the town over here? Or if they don't like pick up on this cue, should I put it over there to the place that they actually want to go? Because the players might just want to spend the entire game in the tavern. They might like an NPC that you created and just want to hang out with them. They might want to turn the entire thing into a shopping excursion, which I personally hate running. But that's what they might want to do. They might ignore all of the plot seeds that you put for them entirely and want to burn down a forest, which has happened to me. So there is literally no way to prep for everything. I am not saying that you cannot prep, but you also do not have to make flowcharts. At least not to that extent. Now, what I advise, what I do is for my campaigns, this does not include three flings. I should be very clear. Anything that I'm talking about here does not include three flings because three flings is very specific. It's all one shots from the Uncaged anthology that are very loosely strung together. So, yeah, the prep is basically just reading and becoming familiar with the material, doing any like setting up any maps, getting the monster stats and stuff like that. But I'm not inventing a campaign other than finding ways to tie them from one adventure to the other. So now what I do is basically have an idea or a theme or a monster or something that you want to explore. Figure out, if not where it's going to end, at least some things that you want them to address, things that you want to happen. Like, bad thing is happening. Why? Who's responsible? Okay, what are some ways they can find out who's responsible? And it doesn't even have to be specific. You know, they don't need to meet Jebediah Johnson at Port Malaise and get the secret tome of understanding to figure out what's going on. They might get a ring that's hidden in a newspaper that a seagull dropped on their head and figure it out that way. But as long as you know that like there's a thing happening, they need information on the thing, they need a place to address the thing. you pretty much have a way to get there. And the fun thing about places is they're movable. So if like you want them to go on a boat and they're refusing to get on a boat, maybe one of the players has a character that's hydrophobic. Maybe it's not across the sea. Maybe it's through a big scary forest and you don't get to use your sea monsters for this adventure, but you'll get to use them for another one. Yeah, that's my little spiel on flexible prep. And also being, if you've watched any of my shows, you know that I am not afraid to ask the players, like, what does that spell do again? Does it check this? Does it tell this? Because I've been running these games for years and I still don't know what every spell does. There's new spells coming out all the time. There's new errata coming out constantly. There's, if for D&D, there's Tasha's. There's a whole bunch of new spells in there that I don't know what they are. If you're playing a new game, you might not be as familiar with it. You might not know it by the back of your hand. I've run games that I wrote that I don't even know what some of the spells do, which is kind of embarrassing. But, there's no harm in asking your players. You're a person. You're fallible. It's fine to ask for assistance. If you don't trust your player or you think that they're trying to pull a fast one on you, I would ask what that says about you and that person at your table. But also there's no harm in asking to see it if you're in the same room or just looking it up. If you're playing D&D, everything's online anyway for free. So yeah, I mean, when you're preparing, know what monsters you want to run, have their stats ready, but it does not have to be a big production. You do not need to spend... I hear about particularly new DMs who want to have this beautiful world and spend like 20 to 30 hours a week preparing for a session. And like, this is not your job. If you're a paid DM, this might be your job. But if you're a paid DM, you're probably running something that was written already. Whenever I've been a paid DM, I didn't get to write my own stuff. I was given something that I was running to promote it. So that's even less prep. It's one thing to want to do something big and beautiful, but also please don't be afraid of DMing because you think you have to take on a part-time job where you don't get paid coming up with a magical world. You really don't. Just use your imagination and put it out there. It's okay. So we have some questions. Wormysis in chat says, does your method thoroughness of prep change depending on the system you use, or do you maintain a pretty standard level of prep across different games? It absolutely changes. For like D&D or Pugmire, you know what? I would say it changes based on whether or not I'm running a campaign versus whether or not I'm running a one-shot. That's the biggest thing. Because I was about to say, if I'm running something like Dumpster Fire, the prep is right there. Like, you roll tables. Dumpster Fire is my little lasers and feelings hack, where you're an opossum or a rat or a book or a raccoon. And the prep is kind of right there. Like, you roll to figure out what the problem is. You roll to see pretty much everything that's going wrong with the dumpster. With some things like more narrative games, it might be based on a tarot card. So they're made to also be GM-less if you want to play that way. So there's very little prep in that. Just, you need to read the game and set up safety tools with everyone. But those tend to be one-shots. So there's not a lot of prep. It's just knowing what the game is, knowing what kind of experience you want to have, and going from there. For a one-shot, I would say there's much less prep because the timing is the big thing that you want to be specific on. Like, know the game, know that you don't want it to take a million years. I can be really strict about the timing on my one-shots. I will have the bad guys all suddenly die kind of thing or something, just if we need to get through to a next point and I want them to see everything, because nobody wants to be in a 7-hour long one shot. I mean, somebody might want to be in a 7-hour long one shot or a 10-hour long one shot. But for my one shots, I like them to be no more than 4 hours, because after that, I need to go away and get up from the table. For campaign, that's more where I think you want to hit the points. And if you can, try and figure out how much time you want to take to get there. Like, is this going to be a 10-session campaign? Is this going to be a 6-session campaign? Is this going to be, heaven forbid, a 40-session or an 80-session campaign? That, I would say, plan it into little arcs kind of thing, of 10 maybe, just to see what kind of things you want to hit. Because your players, if you're planning an 80-session campaign, your players are going to feel like they're not accomplishing anything if you don't have little victories for them along the way and they just keep hearing about the big bad off in the distance. I'm talking really fast and getting out of breath. But yeah, so the shorter answer to that question is it's the same based on the system, but I treat different systems for one-shots versus campaigns. So that is the big change. If I'm doing a D&D one-shot, I treat it the same way as if I'm doing a Lasers and Feelings one-shot. And I had some questions on Twitter. So from Trans Guy Shane, I'm a first-time DM and DMing for new players who are new to D&D. Any tips on how to make people feel more comfortable around all the numbers and character sheets? Also, apparently I describe things in too much detail too fast when entering new environments. Tips on how not to. So for all of the numbers, I would question how much they need to be playing D&D if the numbers are significantly a problem. There's a lot of other games that have fewer stats and fewer numbers involved. But if D&D is really what you want to play, and for a lot of newbies it is because it's the one that they've heard of, I would do away with the stat number and just use the modifier. That, not do away with it, because you can't really do away with it, but tell them to kind of ignore it, because sometimes it can be really confusing to people if you're like, okay, so your number for intelligence is 12, which means it's a +1. And then you say later, like, you add your intelligence to this. And they're like, so I add 12 to that? No, you add +1 to that. So for that point, I would say, like, roll your dice, get the number, and then absolutely forget about it. Just use modifiers from that point on, and proficiency. And it makes it a little bit simpler. Also, if you can help them set up their character sheet, that can take away a lot of the pressure. I'm really bad at numbers. I found the character sheet very intimidating when I first started. And having my DM help me and tell me exactly, like, what went where and how the math worked was helpful. If it's your first time DMing, but it sounds like you are not new to role-playing, then you should be familiar with the character sheet. Also, and I answered this on my Twitter, Joe Cat did a great video on his crap guide to D&D. He recently did a crap guide to character sheets that explained all the numbers and where they go in a very simple, easy way to understand. For describing things in too much detail, I can't address the too fast, because that's just how you describe things, how you talk. If you need to slow down or repeat yourself, that's fine. Yeah, a lot of how we as DMs or GMs or whatever put emphasis on certain words changes how they're perceived. I have definitely slipped up when voicing a character, and it happened last night. I had a character ascribe a gender to an unknown NPC, and they were like, ooh, she knows more than she's letting on. And I was like, nope, I just fucked up and gave her that information. So that's the kind of thing, like, anything that we say can be used to extrapolate a lot of information. So if you need to slow down, repeat something, say like, I messed up, sorry, that's okay. I need to slow down and have water. So for the environment, pretty much anything you describe is going to seem important. Your characters, your players are going to want to play with it. So only describe what is important for narrative, unless you want to give them the fun of wasting their time with playing with extraneous details. For example, if you take them into a room and you're like, this room is old, it's dusty, there's a bed, there's a dresser with a layer of dust on it. On the dresser, there's a cracked mirror and a knick-knack of a chicken. And there may be more, but you would have to investigate. You're going to think that that mirror and that chicken are significant, but they're not. They're just extraneous detail. I want you to investigate to find the trap door. But you wouldn't know that because I described a cracked mirror and a knick-knack of a chicken. If you don't want them to spend time with the mirror and the chicken, don't give them a mirror and a chicken to play with. If that makes at all sense, because they might ignore the bed as just a piece of furniture. They'll probably look under it. But anything else that's in that room is going to be significant. The dresser, they're going to want to rifle through to look for a clue. But any item that is described is going to be examined, and they might spend a lot of time trying to figure out the significance of it. So if it's not significant, it doesn't need to be described. They don't always need to know what time of day it is. They don't always need to know what the weather is. It's nice, it sets the tone, but it is not always the most important thing at hand. If you are inside, you don't need to necessarily know that it's windy outside unless there is something significant that's making it windy. Or you are trying to keep them inside because maybe it's so windy that going outside would be dangerous. Or maybe someone's about to come in to get away from the wind, and that person's going to be significant. From Fantasy Ecology, there were a lot of questions. How do you make boss battles cinematic and exciting? I like to have boss conversations, but for boss battles, I think this really depends on the system. Because some systems, I think Age of Sigmar Soulbound has a great combat mechanic. I think D&D's combat, especially 5e, can become a little bit of a slog. So that's our job as the DM to describe a lot of what's going on. Like, did they miss? And it's like, oh, you missed? Or did their sword like bounce off of the armor? Did they hit and it didn't seem to affect them? Did the boss hit them with a sword and do 5 points of damage? Or did he cleave through their shoulder and now they're injured and spurting blood for 5 points of damage? Just describe it a little bit. That's really it. Also, I like to have the boss taunt them because I'm a jerk like that. Oh, Wormesis, I'm sorry I didn't get to your other question, but come back to the VOD and I will answer it afterwards. Have a good rest of your day. Also from Fantasy Ecology, how do you integrate character backstory into pre-written adventures? I kind of love doing that. Sometimes pre-written adventures give you opportunities for that. So like there's a hook for a few that's like, if there's a paladin or someone is sick and they need a cleric, so then you have your cleric have visions or something. There's a trait that I think the urban bounty hunter has where they always have like a friend in a town. So that's a really easy way to do it. Just give them a buddy that they know in there, an important NPC, maybe the quest giver. They know them. Yeah, that one can be tough, but it can be done. Especially if like they have the urchin background or they can find their way around the city. Maybe they can find something hidden, like if there's a kid, or it's hard to say without knowing what adventures you're talking about. But generally, there is a way to pull it in, although you're never going to have like the big background connections that you would in something that you're creating whole cloth. What I like there is when the players form bonds based off of their backgrounds, and that takes place during the pre-written adventure. So they form connections either based on their background or just coming together. They share information about their backgrounds over the course of the adventure. Maybe something that you put in there stimulates a memory, or like you might not, they might not encounter their dead mother, but they might see a necklace that is reminiscent of their mother's. And then that brings up them having a conversation with another player whose character has been standoffish, and they have a bond. And that's something you can't really control as a DM. Like, you can put that necklace there, but you can't make your players emote together. But it is really beautiful when it happens. Also from Fantasy Ecology, how do you set up situations such that the PCs can change the world? I mean, that's kind of what they're doing. Anywhere they go, they're changing the world. Even if they're just, like, saving a cat, whoever's cat they saved is going to behave differently because of how their cat was saved. So I would say give them consequences. I like giving them consequences where there's always kind of something bad based on what they did. But no, anything that they do, especially given the nature of TTRPGs where you're like a big hero who goes into a town and rescues them and sorts their problems, sometimes the town does not need outsiders coming in to sort their problems. That's a very colonizer perspective. And it might change the town, or change the way they see outsiders. It might change the shape of the town. It might change how they deal with trade. So that's the kind of thing where I would give the PCs information later that, like, oh, you hear that this town now behaves this way as a result of your actions, or maybe not tell them as a result of their actions, but they can infer it. Yeah, because just give their give their actions consequences. How do you make an adventure feel climactic at the end of a story arc? Tie in the emotional beats with the main goal. I think if you've set out this is the thing that they have to go find or stop or encourage, let them do that, or let them fail dramatically and make things way worse, while also, if you can, hitting on emotions that they've established with each other. And trust in your players to do that. But yeah, I would say either let them succeed like big damn heroes or fail in such a way that it is cataclysmic. Wormus's other question. What do you spend more energy prepping? Social political intrigue stuff or dungeons? And do you find either has unique challenges in prep? It's hard to say, honestly. I don't run a lot of dungeons, so I guess just being me, I would say social political stuff. But I'll tell you how I prep them both. So if I'm running a dungeon, I will put a list of a bunch of things that they might encounter. Not necessarily where they'll encounter them, but like in this dungeon, there's like these monsters, these traps. If I'm not running a pre-written adventure, obviously. And there's this amount of money. And these are the things that they'll have to conquer to get through here. And then just kind of have that all out. For a social political intrigue, it'll be, these are the people that they're going to encounter. These are what they want. These are things that will set them off. And these are their social stats, if it's a game that has stats like that. So there was a lot of that in the Pugmire campaign that I ran. So I had everybody's like proficiency and persuasion and bluff kind of thing. and how they would respond to that. But basically, like, these are these characters, these are their secrets, these are what they want, these are things that will set them off. So it's just a different way of prep, but I would say it probably takes the same amount of time. And if anybody else has questions, drop them in the thing. And Ashenworks, what's your favorite part of DMing and your least favorite? I'll start with my least favorite. It is getting everybody together. DM is responsible for scheduling, and I find that to be much easier for streamed games. It's a lot easier for players to show up when they have a commitment to like a show than we're just going to hang out. And it seems like a lot of the bulk of hurting people falls to the DM/GM. And I don't like being the nanny or the person who's like, well, you know, you were really supposed to come and you've missed 3 sessions, so I don't know if you really want to be in the group anymore. I hate being that person. So that is by far my least favorite. My most favorite part of DMing is when the characters just kind of go off and have like emotion. It's gonna sound, my most favorite part of DMing is when I don't have to DM. But no, it's when I can just sit back and watch them play off each other. They have conversations that like delve into their characters, and either like when they're resting and explore facets about each other that maybe something that they've just encountered brought out in one another, and they form bonds. I friggin' love that. I love when player characters connect. I love seeing them help NPCs, particularly NPCs who maybe don't seem like the most trustworthy. Seeing how they react to them, seeing how they take care of each other. I love those connections. That is really a joy for me. So those are all the questions I had from Twitter. And if anybody else has any questions, drop them in the chat. But otherwise, I would just say my final stuff on prep is have fun. Don't be afraid of prep. A lot, like I said before, it scares a lot of newbie DMs away. And if you want to run a game, it's because you have something to bring to the table. Either you have a story to share, or you have an experience that you want to shape. Maybe you want to run a game in a way that you've never experienced it. I started DMing because, well, I wanted to play Mouse Guard and nobody else wanted to run it for me. But also, like, if you want to run a game, it might be because you've never played a game that went exactly like how you would have preferred it. Maybe you've played games and you were like, I would have done that differently. I would have done that differently. I wish we could have done that. And if you're having a lot of those feelings, maybe you should run a game. But don't let the prep scare you. There's probably less of it than you need to do. And even if at the table your adventurers go off on a completely different tangent, there is nothing wrong with just saying, okay, I was not prepared for this outcome right now. Just give me a few minutes and let me figure out what I'm going to do here, and then we'll come back. Doesn't always work on a streamed game, but on a streamed game, your players are less likely to do that anyway. So, yeah, if you are blessed to be in a place where the plague lets you hang out together, unlike where I am, you might just need to step away from the table, or you could say like, look, I wasn't prepared for this inevitability, so we'll just need to pick this up next time. But I'm guessing that usually you can figure out something to do. There's always a way to seed something that you were planning that goes with what the players really want to do. And if sometimes they just need a day to like fuck off and like have a beer in character, and your grand adventure can wait a week. Like, let them let loose and have a beer in character. Give them a good party. Sometimes that's all they want. It doesn't have to be about our grand goals for them. So that was today's tips on prep. I hope you found this helpful. I know I run these really sporadically, but I hope you enjoyed this. And I will be doing one of these again. So have a wonderful holiday, and love to you and love to your loved ones, and stay warm, okay? Bye.